The old man's breath rattled like dry leaves against concrete. 85-year-old Ntate Kabelo Motsamai lay on a narrow prison cot, wrists thin as rope, eyes fixed on the young nun standing beside him. Sister Tsholofelo Seema was only 20, her veil slightly trembling as she leaned closer to hear his final words. "I don't want freedom," he whispered. "I want the truth delivered." A guard laughed. Officer Mandla Nkosi stepped forward and tore a small sealed envelope from the old man's shaking hand. It fell to the floor. The wooden cross slipped after it, striking the cement with a hollow sound. "No last wishes for men like him," Mandla said coldly. Tsholofelo reached down, but two guards pulled her back. Behind her, Kabelo's chest rose once, then stilled.
What truth was so dangerous it had to die with him? Before we continue, tell me, which country are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? If stories of justice, compassion, and unexpected courage move, you consider subscribing so you never miss the next chapter.
Sister Tsholofelo Seema had learned early that silence could be holy, and that it could also be violent. In the small convent tucked behind a busy taxi rank in Johannesburg, mornings began before the sun. The bell rang at 4:30 a.m., and the corridors filled with soft footsteps and whispered prayers. Tsholofelo moved like someone trying not to disturb the world, as if the air itself deserved gentleness. She was 20, but her eyes held the steady patience of someone who had seen hunger, grief, and the slow disappointment of broken promises. She had not grown up in South Africa. Her childhood lived in Botswana, in a dusty village outside Molepolole, where the road turned to sand and the nights were so quiet you could hear goats shifting in their pens. Her mother, Tsholofelo Seema, sold boiled maize and fat cakes by the roadside. Her father had died when Tsholofelo was 12, fever the clinic too far, the money not enough. After the funeral, her mother's voice became smaller, and the world became harder. Tsholofelo remembered the look in her mother's face when customers counted coins too slowly, deciding whether kindness was affordable. She remembered the shame of being sent home from school for unpaid fees. She remembered praying not for riches, but for one normal week where nobody had to beg. When a visiting sister from Gaborone came to their village and offered a scholarship for girls willing to join a vocational program attached to the church, Tsholofelo's mother cried until her shoulders shook. Not because she wanted her daughter to disappear into religion, but because she wanted her daughter to escape the trap that swallowed girls like water: early marriage, unpaid labor, quiet suffering disguised as life. Tsholofelo had left Botswana, carrying two things: a small bag of clothes and a promise that she would not forget the people who stayed behind. At 16, she began her formation. At 19, she took temporary vows as a novice. At 20, she was assigned to South Africa as part of a ministry partnership work that most young sisters avoided because it was heavy and thankless. Prison ministry. "It will test you," Mother Superior Lerato Malangu had warned her the day Tsholofelo arrived in Johannesburg. Mother Lerato was a tall, stern woman with kind eyes that rarely softened. She had seen many good-hearted young women burn out quickly, crushed by systems that did not respond to mercy. "This city can swallow you," Mother Lerato said, "and prisons are a different kind of darkness. Do not go in thinking you can save anyone." Tsholofelo had nodded, not because she believed she would save anyone, but because she believed people deserved to be seen. That belief was why she had stood beside an 85-year-old prisoner named Ntate Kabelo Motsamai in the prison infirmary that morning. And that belief was why she could not stop seeing his last moment, his thin chest rising, once then stilling while a guard's laugh echoed against the walls. The memory followed her back through the prison gates, past the razor wire and the metal detectors, all the way to the convent. That evening, she sat in the chapel alone, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned pale. The candles trembled in their glass holders as if they also struggled to remain steady. She did not cry. Not yet. Crying felt too small for what she had witnessed. It was not only death that disturbed her. It was the cruelty around it, how easily Officer Mandla Nkosi had taken the sealed envelope from Kabelo's hand like it was trash. How casually the wooden cross had fallen and hit the cement as if the world itself had dropped its last softness. No last wishes for men like him. Those words had lodged in Tsholofelo's chest like a stone. Men like him. Who was Ntate Kabelo Motsamai? Why did he die with fear in his eyes, fear not of death, but of unfinished truth? The next morning, Tsholofelo returned to the prison with a small bag of donated toiletries and a list of inmates who had requested spiritual counsel. She told herself she was going to follow routine. She told herself she would not let one death turn her into a reckless woman. But the prison had a way of announcing its intentions the moment you stepped inside. At the security desk, a guard flipped through her authorization papers with exaggerated boredom, then pushed them back. "You are late," he said. "I'm not," Tsholofelo replied quietly. "It is 8:05. My pass is for 8:00. He shrugged. "System is down." Behind him, another guard smirked. Maybe the system doesn't like nuns. Tsholofelo waited without arguing. She had learned that pride was expensive in places where you had no power. After 15 minutes, she was finally allowed through. The corridors smelled of bleach and sweat, a sharp mixture that clung to clothes. Prisoners in orange uniforms shuffled in lines, eyes trained on the floor. Some looked up when they saw her. Not with hope, but with a kind of exhausted curiosity, as if they wondered what a young woman in a veil could possibly do inside a world built for punishment. She was escorted to the chaplain's office, a narrow room with a metal desk and a small cross taped crookedly to the wall. The chaplain, Father Sifo Dube, was a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired shoulders. He had served in prisons long enough to stop expecting gratitude. When he saw Tsholofelo, his expression tightened. "I heard about Kabelo," Tsholofelo said before she could stop herself. "He died yesterday." Father Sifo exhaled. "Yes, he had a sealed envelope," she continued. "Officer Mandla took it." Father Sifo's eyes flicked to the closed door, then back to her. "Sister, you should let it go." Tsholofelo's voice remained calm, but her heart beat louder. "Why?" "Because this place is not built for closure," Father Sifo said softly. "And Mandla Nkosi is not a man you challenge." Tsholofelo leaned forward slightly. Kabelo's last words were not about forgiveness. He said he wanted the truth delivered. Father Sifo's jaw tightened as if he was chewing on something bitter. Many men say things when they are dying. "He wasn't confused," Tsholofelo insisted. "He looked at me like he was begging me to remember." Father Sifo's eyes softened for a moment. "Do you know why you are safe in here?" Sister Tsholofelo didn't answer. "Because you are not a problem," he said. "You come, you pray, you listen, you leave. That is all they tolerate. The moment you start asking questions, you become inconvenient." Tsholofelo sat back, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. She wanted to believe Father Sifo was only being cautious, but something in his voice carried more than caution. It carried fear. "Who was Kabelo?" she asked. Father Sifo stared at the desk for a long moment. "A forgotten old man. That's not an answer." Father Sifo lifted his gaze. "He was convicted 32 years ago. Armed robbery, conspiracy, murder." Tsholofelo felt cold spread through her stomach. "Murder. Yes," Father Sifo said. "A businessman was killed in a car ambush outside Pretoria. Kabelo was blamed as part of the group." "Was he guilty?" Tsholofelo asked. Father Sifo's lips pressed together. "The court said he was. That's still not an answer." The chaplain's eyes held hers, and in them, Tsholofelo saw something like sorrow and something like helplessness. I have read many case files, Father Sifo said quietly. I have seen men who deserve prison, and men who deserve mercy, and men who deserve both. Kabelo. Kabelo always claimed he was protecting someone, that he took a fall. Protecting who? Father Sifo shook his head. He never said. Tsholofelo's mind returned to the way Kabelo had whispered. I don't want freedom. I want the truth delivered. If he had taken the fall, then someone had benefited. And if someone had benefited, then someone had power. Before Tsholofelo could speak again, the door opened sharply. Officer Mandla Nkosi stepped in without knocking. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore his uniform like armor. His eyes moved from Father Sifo to Tsholofelo, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a smile that contained no warmth. Ah, Mandla said. The young saint is back. Tsholofelo stood automatically, hands folded in front of her. Good morning, Officer Nkosi. Mandla walked closer, his boots loud against the floor. Do you know what I like about nuns? Tsholofelo kept her face neutral. No, officer. They think the world is a story, Mandla said. Good people, bad people, justice at the end, like a movie. He leaned slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. This is not a movie. Father Sifo cleared his throat. Officer Nkosi's sister Tsholofelo is here for scheduled visits. Mandla ignored him. His gaze stayed on Tsholofelo. You were with Kabelo yesterday, weren't you? Tsholofelo felt her pulse jump, but she did not deny. Yes, Mandla's smile widened. Old men talk too much when they're dying. They start believing their own lies. Tsholofelo swallowed. He asked me to pray with him. Mandla's eyes sharpened. Did he give you anything? No, Tsholofelo answered, truthful. Mandla studied her face as if searching for a crack. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a wooden cross. It was the same one that had fallen to the infirmary floor. Tsholofelo's breath caught. Mandla rolled it between his fingers. This. He tossed it lightly in the air and caught it again like a toy. Old sentimental nonsense. Tsholofelo's voice came out softer than she intended. May I have it? Mandla laughed once. Why? It belonged to him, she said. It's not contraband, it's a religious item. Mandla stepped closer until Tsholofelo could smell the tobacco on his breath. You want it because you think it means something. Tsholofelo did not back away. I want it because it is not yours. For a second, Mandla's smile disappeared. Then he chuckled, slow and dangerous. Careful, sister. You are starting to sound like you have opinions. Father Sifo spoke quickly. Officer, it's a small thing. Let her have it. It will comfort her. Mandla's eyes flicked to Father Sifo with irritation, then back to Tsholofelo. He turned the cross over, exposing the back. There was a carving etched into it, an unfamiliar symbol, precise and deliberate. Tsholofelo's gaze locked onto it. Mandla noticed. His hand tightened. You recognize it? He asked. No, Tsholofelo replied, but the truth was more complicated. She didn't recognize it yet. Something about it felt intentional, like a mark meant to be found by the right person. Mandla slipped the cross back into his pocket. No, he said, answering her request. You may not have it. Then he turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to leave one final sentence hanging in the air. Stop digging into graves, Sister Tsholofelo. Some dead men are buried for a reason. When he left, the room felt smaller, as if the walls had moved inward. Tsholofelo stood very still. Father Sifo looked at her with quiet warning. Now you see, he murmured. This is why I told you to let it go. But Tsholofelo could no longer let it go, because Mandla Nkosi had not acted like a man mocking a dying prisoner. He had acted like a man guarding something valuable, and that meant Ntate Kabelo Motsamai's final wish was not sentimental. It was evidence. Rumors moved faster than prayer inside Johannesburg Central Correctional Facility. By the time Sister Tsholofelo Seema returned the next morning, the guards were already watching her differently. It was not open hostility, not yet. It was something colder, measured, as if her presence had shifted from harmless charity to potential inconvenience. She signed her name into the visitor's ledger and noticed a new red mark beside it. Additional supervision required. She did not ask what that meant. Instead, she carried her worn leather Bible and walked through the first security gate. The metal doors shut behind her with a sound that always reminded her of finality, of decisions that could not be undone. She was escorted not to the chapel, but directly to cell block C, the oldest wing of the prison where the elderly and long-term inmates were housed. The corridor was dimmer here, the paint peeling from the walls like tired skin. As she passed, some inmates lifted their heads. "Is it true?" one man asked in a hoarse whisper. She slowed. "Is what true? They say Ntate Kabelo died angry." Another voice from inside a cell added, "They say he finally spoke." Tsholofelo felt the air tighten around her. Spoke about what? The first man gave a short laugh. "You don't know, then maybe you're not the one he trusted." Before she could respond, the guard escorting her tapped his baton against the bars. "Enough," he snapped. Silence. Tsholofelo continued walking, but the words followed her. "Maybe you're not the one he trusted." She stopped outside an empty cell. Kabelo's cell. His thin blanket had already been folded and removed. The mattress was bare. The small metal shelf where he had kept his cup and soap was wiped clean as if he had never existed. Erased in less than 24 hours. Tsholofelo placed her fingers lightly on the cold bars. She had sat here only a week ago while Kabelo told her about Botswana's droughts in the 1970s, about driving long highways with dust storms chasing his car, about a son he had not seen in decades. He had not spoken like a murderer. He had spoken like a man who missed home. "You won't find anything there." The voice came from behind her. Tsholofelo turned slowly. Officer Mandla Nkosi stood at the end of the corridor, arms crossed, watching her with mild amusement. "I wasn't looking for anything," she said evenly. "Of course you were," Mandla replied. "Curiosity is dangerous in this place." She stepped away from the cell bars. "I was saying a prayer." Mandla shrugged. "Pray quietly, then." She studied his face. It was calm. Too calm. Why was his cell cleared so quickly, she asked. Mandla's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Is that unusual? He died yesterday." And Mandla spread his hands. "Space is limited. The living require beds." Tsholofelo did not move. "Did he have any belongings?" Besides the cross, Mandla's expression sharpened. "Why?" "Because families deserve closure," she said. "Even prisoners have families." Mandla's gaze hardened. Kabelo had no family. No one came for him in 30 years. That doesn't mean no one exists. Mandla stepped closer. His boots echoed in the corridor. "Let me explain something to you, Sister Tsholofelo. Men like Kabelo survive in here by lying. They build stories to comfort themselves. He was convicted of murder, armed robbery. The court decided. And courts never make mistakes," she asked quietly. For a second, silence fell between them. Then Mandla's smile returned, but it did not reach his eyes. "You are young," he said. "Youth believes in correcting the world." He leaned slightly closer. "But some truths are expensive, and some men are buried, so that others may live peacefully." The phrase struck her like a slap. "So that others may live peacefully." "You speak as if you know what he was protecting," she said before she could stop herself. Mandla's eyes flickered just once. Then the mask came back. "I protect this prison," he said. "That is my job." He turned and walked away without another word. Tsholofelo remained standing in the corridor long after he disappeared. The inmates inside their cells had gone silent, but she could feel their attention pressing against her. They knew something, and Mandla knew something. That afternoon, she was permitted to visit the infirmary under supervision. Dr. Zanele Dlamini was reviewing charts when Tsholofelo entered. The doctor was in her early 40s, her braided hair pulled into a neat bun, glasses sliding slightly down her nose as she read. Without looking up, she said, "You are not supposed to be here alone." "I'm not alone," Tsholofelo replied gently. "The guard is outside." Dr. Zanele glanced toward the doorway, then lowered her voice. "They're watching you." "I know," the doctor sighed. "I warned Kabelo not to trust anyone." Tsholofelo's heart jumped. "You knew." Dr. Zanele finally looked at her fully. "He spoke to me too," she said quietly. "Not details, but enough." "What did he say?" Tsholofelo asked. "That he carried someone else's crime," Dr. Zanele replied. "That the man who truly benefited from that night built an empire afterward." Tsholofelo felt a chill spread across her arms. "Do you believe him?" she asked. Dr. Zanele closed the file in front of her. "I believe medical records don't disappear by accident. I believe legal files don't lose pages unless someone removes them." Tsholofelo swallowed. There were missing pages, yes. How many? 3 critical pages from the original conviction record, Dr. Zanele said. "Witness statements." Tsholofelo's thoughts raced. Why would they remove witness statements, she asked. "Because witnesses tell stories," Dr. Zanele replied, "and stories can unravel verdicts." A guard's shadow shifted outside the door. Dr. Zanele lowered her voice further. "You should not be asking questions. Mandla does not operate alone." "What do you mean, I mean?" the doctor said carefully. "This prison receives funding from private donors, influential families, business foundations." Tsholofelo's stomach tightened. "Are you saying Kabelo's case involved one of them?" Dr. Zanele did not answer directly. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a small plastic evidence pouch. "I was not supposed to keep this," she said. Inside the pouch lay a silver ring. The engraving on its surface matched the symbol Tsholofelo had glimpsed on the back of the wooden cross. Her breath caught. "This was found among Kabelo's confiscated items years ago," Dr. Zanele said. "It was never logged properly. It should have been destroyed." "Why wasn't it?" Tsholofelo whispered. "Because I have been here long enough to know when something feels wrong." Tsholofelo stared at the symbol. It was not decorative. It looked like a crest, a family mark. "Do you recognize it?" she asked. Dr. Zanele hesitated. "I've seen something similar," she admitted, "on a charity gala banner. A foundation name." "Which one?" The doctor's lips pressed thin. "Radebe Legacy Trust." The name landed heavy between them. Patriarch Thabo Radebe was one of the wealthiest industrialists in southern Africa. His foundation funded schools, hospitals, prison rehabilitation programs, including this one. Tsholofelo felt the world tilt slightly. If Kabelo took the fall, she said slowly, and the Radebe family benefited. Dr. Zanele's eyes sharpened. "Careful," she warned. Outside footsteps approached. Dr. Zanele quickly slid the ring back into the drawer. The door opened. Officer Mandla stepped in, his gaze moving from Tsholofelo to the doctor. "Is there a medical emergency?" he asked casually. "No," Dr. Zanele replied smoothly. "Sister Tsholofelo was offering prayer for the staff." Mandla's eyes rested on Tsholofelo a moment longer than necessary. "How kind," he said. He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, sister," he added lightly. "We reviewed Kabelo's effects." Tsholofelo held her breath. "There was no envelope," Mandla said. Her heart thudded. He died with nothing but regret. He left. The door closed. Tsholofelo stood frozen. He was lying. She knew it. Because she had seen the envelope fall. And now it was gone. Not logged, not returned, gone, which meant someone had taken it deliberately. Dr. Zanelle exhaled slowly. You see now, yes, Tsholofelo whispered. This is not about a dying man's confession, the doctor said. It's about protecting something bigger. Tsholofelo nodded, but inside her chest, something had already shifted. This was no longer about curiosity. It was about a promise. Kabelo had not asked for forgiveness. He had asked for truth. And if Mandla Nkosi was willing to erase evidence within hours of the old man's death, then the truth was still alive, somewhere. Hidden, guarded, waiting. Tsholofelo looked toward the door where Mandla had stood. She no longer saw a prison officer. She saw a gatekeeper. And behind him, a secret worth killing for. The sealed envelope had existed. Sister Tsholofelo Seema knew it with the same certainty she knew the rhythm of morning prayer. She had seen it tremble in Ntate Kabelo's frail hand. She had watched it slip from his fingers when Officer Mandla Nkosi tore it away. Paper made a different sound from wood when it hit cement, softer but final. Now it was gone. And the disappearance was too deliberate to be accidental. That night, Tsholofelo did not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed in the convent dormitory, staring at the faint line of light beneath the door. The city outside hummed with distant taxis and restless engines. Johannesburg never truly went silent. It simply changed its tone. Across the room, another novice sister shifted in her sleep. Tsholofelo turned onto her side, clutching her rosary. But prayer would not come easily. Her mind replayed the symbol carved into the wooden cross and etched into the silver ring Dr. Zanelle had shown her. A crest, a mark, a family identity. And Mandla had reacted when he saw her notice it. That reaction was not the reflex of a bored guard. It was the reflex of a man protecting something fragile. She sat up abruptly. Kabelo's final words echoed again. I don't want freedom. I want the truth delivered. Delivered, not discovered, not avenged. Delivered. Which meant someone specific was meant to receive it. The next morning, Tsholofelo asked Mother Superior Lerato for permission to review Kabelo's pastoral file. Mother Lerato studied her carefully across the wooden desk in her office. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, catching dust in the air. You are not assigned to investigate, Mother Lerato said evenly. I'm not investigating, Tsholofelo replied softly. I'm seeking clarity. Mother Lerato folded her hands. Clarity is often more dangerous than ignorance. Tsholofelo lowered her gaze respectfully. He trusted me. That is precisely what worries me. Silence stretched between them. Mother Lerato had once told Tsholofelo that obedience was not submission, it was discipline. But Tsholofelo also knew obedience did not require blindness. After a long pause, Mother Lerato opened a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. This is all we have, she said. He rarely spoke to staff. Most of his confessions were brief. Tsholofelo accepted the file gently. Inside were handwritten notes from Father Sifo Dube. Dates, occasional reflections. One line caught her attention immediately. KM insists the man who died that night was not the true target. Her pulse quickened. Not the true target. Below that entry, another line from 2 years earlier mentions the child again. Refuses to elaborate. The child. Tsholofelo felt something shift inside her. If Kabelo had taken the fall, if the murdered businessman had not been the intended target, and if a child was involved, this was not simple robbery gone wrong. It was protection. She closed the file carefully. May I return to the prison this afternoon? She asked. Mother Lerato's gaze hardened slightly. You were scheduled for tomorrow. I know, but if I wait, you fear evidence will disappear, Mother Lerato finished. Tsholofelo did not deny it. Mother Lerato exhaled slowly. You are young, she said, and youth often mistakes courage for invincibility. I'm not invincible, Tsholofelo replied quietly. But I am not afraid of discomfort. Mother Lorato stood and walked to the window. For a moment she looked less like a superior, and more like a woman who had carried too many burdens alone. "Be careful," she said finally, "and do not move without telling me." Tsholofelo nodded. When she arrived at the prison that afternoon, the atmosphere felt heavier. Officer Mandler was not at the front desk. Instead, a younger guard processed her entry without sarcasm. Too polite, too rehearsed. She was escorted not to cell block C, but to the administrative office. Mandler waited inside. He sat behind a desk, relaxed fingers laced together. "Sister Tsholofelo," he said smoothly. "Unexpected visit." "I had free time," she replied. Mandler leaned back. "Free time is a luxury." She stepped forward. "I'd like to collect Ntate Kabelo's personal effects, for record purposes." Mandler's eyebrow rose slightly. "You were told," he said calmly. "He had nothing." "He had a cross," she said. Mandler smiled faintly. "Religious sentiment does not override protocol. Protocol requires logging confiscated items," she countered gently. For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. "You read policy manuals now, I read," she said simply. Mandler stood. He walked around the desk, slowly stopping just a few feet from her. "You think this is about justice," he said quietly. "You think an old man's whisper can topple something established." Tsholofelo met his gaze. "I think dying men don't invent elaborate lies for entertainment." Mandler studied her face carefully. Then he did something unexpected. He opened a cabinet drawer behind him. Inside lay the wooden cross. Her breath caught. He picked it up, turning it between his fingers. "You want this?" he asked. "Yes." He held it out toward her, then withdrew it slightly. "Tell me why," he said. Tsholofelo's voice did not shake. "Because he carved it himself," she said. "Because it mattered to him. Because it is not yours." Mandler's eyes narrowed. "And if it contains something dangerous, then it was dangerous long before I touched it." A tense silence filled the room. Then slowly, Mandler placed the cross into her hand. The weight surprised her. It felt heavier than wood should feel. "Keep it," Mandler said. "It won't save you." Tsholofelo bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Mandler's voice stopped her. "Be careful what you deliver, sister," he said softly. "Sometimes the truth destroys the messenger first." She did not respond. Outside the office, she walked calmly down the corridor, but her heart pounded. Once inside the chapel room, she closed the door behind her and examined the cross carefully. The carving on the back was precise, far too intricate for decoration alone. She ran her fingers along the edges. There, a slight indentation near the base. Her breath slowed. She pressed gently. The bottom section shifted. The cross was hollow. Inside, folded tightly, was a thin strip of paper. Her hands trembled as she removed it. The paper was fragile, worn from years of hiding. She unfolded it slowly. Two things were written inside: a name and an address. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki, Cape Town, below it in smaller handwriting, "For the child." Tsholofelo felt the room tilt slightly. Ayanda Mbeki. The name sounded familiar. She had heard it on the radio, once an outspoken human rights lawyer, known for reopening cold cases involving wrongful convictions. Her pulse raced. Kabelo had not wanted revenge. He had wanted a lawyer. He had wanted this delivered. And Mandler had not known the cross was hollow. Or if he did, he had allowed her to take it anyway. Why her thoughts collided. Was this a trap, or had Mandler underestimated her? The strip of paper shook in her hand. For the child Kabelo had mentioned for years. If there was a child involved in the original case, then perhaps someone powerful had been shielded. Someone whose name could not appear in court records. Tsholofelo folded the paper carefully and placed it inside her sleeve. Her breathing steadied. She was no longer guessing. She had direction. She would need to travel. Cape Town was far. She would need permission. And she would need to move carefully. Because if Mandla discovered what she had found, he would not remain polite. As she exited the prison that evening, she felt eyes on her. Not just guards, not just inmates, something larger, something watchful. The sky above Johannesburg burned orange as the sun lowered. Tsholofelo walked toward the taxi rank, the wooden cross hidden beneath her sleeve. For the first time, fear crept into her chest. Not fear of prison, not fear of confrontation, fear of scale. If the Radebe Legacy Trust was connected, then this was not about one old man's innocence. It was about protecting a dynasty. She stepped into the taxi and sat near the window. As the vehicle pulled into traffic, she closed her eyes briefly. "Lord," she whispered, "if this truth is meant to live, let me carry it wisely." The taxi sped forward, and somewhere behind her, Officer Mandla Nkosi stood at the prison gate, watching it disappear. He did not look angry. He looked calculating. Soweto did not look like a place where dynasties hid secrets. It looked like life. Vendors called out prices over the roar of minibus taxis. Children chased a punctured soccer ball between stalls. Women balanced crates of tomatoes on their heads as if gravity respected their discipline. Smoke from grilled meat curled into the late afternoon sky. Sister Tsholofelo Seema stepped into the market wearing her simple gray habit and veil, drawing occasional glances but no real suspicion. Nuns were not rare in Johannesburg. Curiosity followed them. Yes, but not fear. She preferred markets to offices. Markets told the truth about a place. If someone had once lived loudly enough to shake a city, the market would remember. She had not told Mother Superior Lerato everything, only that she needed to travel briefly for ministry consultation. The full story about the hollow cross, the name of Advocate Ayanda Mbeki, remained folded against her skin like a quiet flame. Before traveling to Cape Town, she needed context, and there was one name from Father Sifo's notes that lingered in her mind. The man who died that night was not the true target. If that were true, then the murder decades ago had been mistaken or staged. She moved past a vegetable stall and stopped at a small table, where an elderly woman sat behind piles of dried beans and hand-woven baskets. The woman's face was lined deeply, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Mama Tsholofelo," greeted respectfully. The woman nodded. "Sister, I'm looking for someone who might remember an old case," Tsholofelo said carefully. "A man named Ntate Kabelo Motsamai." The woman's hand stilled, just for a second. Then they resumed sorting beans. "That name is old," she said. "Yes. Why dig up old bones?" "Because he died yesterday," Tsholofelo replied softly. "And he died asking for truth." The woman looked up fully now. Her gaze was no longer casual. It was searching. "You're too young to remember," the woman said. "That name once made newspapers whisper. Whisper, not headlines," she clarified. "Whispers." Tsholofelo leaned slightly closer. "What do you know?" The woman studied her veil, her posture, her steady eyes. "My name is Mama Naledi Kumalo," she said finally. "I sold fruit outside the Pretoria courthouse 30 years ago." Tsholofelo's pulse quickened, and she prompted gently. "And I watched that trial," Mama Naledi continued. "Not inside, outside. The journalists would come out smoking, arguing about what could and could not be printed." "What could not be printed?" Tsholofelo asked. Mama Naledi's mouth tightened. "There was talk," she said quietly, "that the businessman who died, he was not the intended victim." Tsholofelo's breath caught. "The intended victim was a child," Mama Naledi whispered. The same word again. "The child." "Whose child?" Tsholofelo asked. Mama Naledi shook her head slowly. "That was never clear. But people said the boy had been in the car that night." A boy survived, Tsholofelo asked. Allegedly, Mama Naledi replied. But he vanished from the story. How does a child vanish from a murder case? Mama Naledi gave a bitter smile. The same way missing pages vanish from files. Tsholofelo's heart pounded. What about Kabelo? She asked. He was a driver, Mama Naledi said. Worked for someone important. Not the dead businessman, someone bigger. Bigger. Mama Naledi's eyes darted briefly toward the street, then back to Tsholofelo. You didn't hear this from me, she said, but people whispered that Kabelo switched cars that night. Switched cars, Tsholofelo repeated, to protect the boy. Silence fell between them, thick as dust. And the wrong man died, Tsholofelo asked. Mama Naledi nodded slowly. Or the right man died for the wrong reason. Tsholofelo felt the weight of the wooden cross beneath her sleeve. Why would Kabelo take the blame? She asked. Because loyalty is expensive, Mama Naledi said quietly. And sometimes men trade their freedom for someone else's future. Do you know whose future? Tsholofelo pressed. Mama Naledi's eyes darkened. Careful, sister, she said. There are families in this country whose names open doors and close mouths. Tsholofelo hesitated. Does the name Radebe mean anything to you? The effect was immediate. Mama Naledi's hand froze mid-air. Her gaze sharpened into something almost fearful. You should not say that name lightly, she whispered. So it is connected, Tsholofelo asked. Mama Naledi leaned closer. There was a gala, once she said. A charity event. The Radebe Legacy Trust was celebrating expansion. New hospitals, new schools, and Tsholofelo urged. And there was a young man there, Mama Naledi said slowly. About 20 years old at the time, presented as a relative. Quiet, protected. Protected how bodyguards, no press questions, and the crest on the banner behind him. She paused. It matched a symbol I had seen once before, on a ring worn by a man who visited Kabelo during the early years of his sentence. Tsholofelo's breath stopped. A ring. Yes. Silver Mama Naledi's eyes widened slightly. You've seen it. Tsholofelo did not answer directly. What happened to the boy? She asked instead. Mama Naledi shook her head. No one knows. Officially, he never existed in the case, and the man who died, buried as a tragic victim of robbery, and Kabelo buried alive for 3 decades. The market noise seemed distant now. What about the envelope? Tsholofelo asked softly. Mama Naledi studied her carefully. He left something with you, didn't he? Tsholofelo hesitated. Why would you think that? Because men like Kabelo do not beg at the end, Mama Naledi said. They entrust. A chill ran through Tsholofelo. Entrust, what she asked. The final piece, Mama Naledi replied. A sudden crash echoed nearby as a crate fell over. Tsholofelo turned instinctively. 2 men stood near the edge of the market, not shopping, not speaking, just watching. One of them wore sunglasses, despite the fading sun. Her stomach tightened. Do you see them? She whispered. Mama Naledi did not look directly, but her jaw stiffened. Yes. Have they been here long, since you arrived? Fear pricked at Tsholofelo's skin, not panic but awareness. They know I'm asking questions, she murmured. Then stop asking them in public, Mama Naledi said sharply. Tsholofelo stepped back from the stall. If something happens to me, do not say that Mama Naledi interrupted. But if it does, Tsholofelo continued firmly. Remember that Kabelo said he was protecting a child. Mama Naledi's gaze softened. You are not afraid, she observed. I am, Tsholofelo admitted. But fear does not cancel responsibility. The 2 men began moving closer. Not quickly, just gradually. Tsholofelo's heart thudded. Go, Mama Naledi whispered, and do not come back here. Tsholofelo nodded once. She turned and walked calmly into the flow of market traffic, resisting the urge to run. Running would confirm guilt. Instead, she blended into the crowd, letting bodies and baskets obscure her. She ducked into a taxi without looking back. As the vehicle pulled away, she glanced through the rear window. The two men stood at the edge of the market, scanning the departing taxis. One of them lifted a phone to his ear. Her pulse pounded in her ears. This was no longer theoretical. Someone was monitoring her movements, which meant the name on that folded paper, Advocate Ayanda Mbeki, was dangerous enough to trigger attention. The taxi merged into traffic. Tsholofelo leaned back, forcing her breathing to slow. If the Radebe Legacy Trust was protecting a hidden heir, if Kabelo had switched cars to save a child, if the murdered businessman had not been the true target, then this was not just about corruption. It was about succession, power, inheritance. She closed her eyes briefly. "Lord," she whispered again, "do not let this truth die, because I moved too slowly." Cape Town waited, and so did the child who had once vanished from a case file. The next morning, Johannesburg felt heavier. Not because the sky was gray, it was clear and bright, but because Sister Tsholofelo Seema now understood that she was no longer moving quietly beneath notice. She was moving inside someone else's field of vision. She returned to the prison with measured calm, though her sleep had been fractured by images of the two men in the market. She did not tell Mother Superior Larato about them. Not yet. Fear had a way of multiplying when spoken too early. At the prison gates, Officer Mandla Nkosi was waiting. Not inside, outside, as if he had known the exact hour she would arrive. "Good morning, sister," he said pleasantly. "Good morning, Officer Nkosi." He studied her face carefully. "You've been busy," he said. "I visit people," she replied evenly. "That is my assignment." Mandla nodded slowly. "Yes, visiting." He stepped aside and allowed her to pass without resistance. That unsettled her, more than hostility would have. Inside cell block C, the atmosphere had shifted. Kabelo's former cell was no longer empty. A thin elderly man with trembling hands now occupied it. His name tag read Ntate Mfo Seleke. When Tsholofelo approached, he looked up warily. "You were with Kabelo," he said quietly. "Yes." Ntate Mfo leaned closer to the bars. "They punished him before he died." Her chest tightened. "How?" she asked. "For talking," Mfo whispered. "They moved him to isolation 2 nights before the infirmary." Isolation. Kabelo had never mentioned it. Why, she asked. "Because someone came asking about old records," Mfo said. "After that he was watched constantly." "Who came?" Tsholofelo asked. Mfo hesitated. "A man in a suit. Not prison staff." Her pulse quickened. "Did you hear his name?" Mfo shook his head. But Mandla treated him like a superior. That was enough. A suited visitor. Mandla deferential, funding, influence, Radebe. Tsholofelo felt the invisible lines connecting. "What did Kabelo say before isolation?" she asked. Mfo swallowed. He said, "It's almost time." Her throat tightened. Time for what? As she left the cell block, she headed toward the infirmary again. Dr. Zanele Dlamini was alone sorting medical files. She did not look surprised to see Tsholofelo. "They moved Kabelo before he died," Tsholofelo said, without preamble. "Yes," Dr. Zanele replied quietly. "Isolation Unit B. Why officially behavioral concern, and unofficially?" Dr. Zanele met her gaze. "Because he requested access to archived legal correspondence." Tsholofelo's breath caught. "What correspondence letters sent to him years ago?" Dr. Zanele said. "Letters that were returned unopened, from whom I never saw the sender," she admitted. "But they were redirected through administrative screening." Tsholofelo's thoughts raced. "What if the envelope he gave me was not the first attempt?" she murmured. Dr. Zanele nodded slowly. "That would explain Mandla's urgency." "Is there surveillance in Isolation Unit B?" Tsholofelo asked. "Yes. Can it be accessed?" Dr. Zanele hesitated. Officially, only by administration, and unofficially, the doctor gave her a long look. You are not prepared for what unofficial paths require. Tsholofelo's voice remained steady. Was Kabelo mistreated? Dr. Zanele's silence was answer enough. They reduced his medication dosage, she said finally. Delayed treatment, enough to weaken him. On whose order no paper trail, the doctor replied. But isolation decisions do not happen without Mandla's approval. Anger rose in Tsholofelo's chest, not loud, not explosive, but deep and controlled. He was 85, she said softly. Yes, and they feared him. Dr. Zanele's eyes darkened. They did not fear him, she corrected. They feared what he remembered. Footsteps approached outside. Dr. Zanele lowered her voice. You must move carefully now. Mandla knows you are not passive. Tsholofelo nodded. As she left the infirmary, she spotted Mandla speaking to another officer at the end of the corridor. Their conversation stopped when they noticed her. Mandla smiled, the smile of a man who believed he was still in control. That evening, back at the convent, Tsholofelo finally told Mother Superior Lerato about Cape Town. She did not mention the men at the market, but she mentioned the lawyer. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki, Mother Lerato repeated. Yes, she is not someone one approaches lightly. I don't intend to approach lightly, Tsholofelo replied. I intend to deliver something. Mother Lerato's gaze sharpened. You are certain this is not delusion born of grief? I am certain, Tsholofelo said calmly. The cross was hollow. Silence filled the office. You found something inside, Mother Lerato stated. Yes, and you did not tell me immediately. Tsholofelo lowered her eyes. I wanted to confirm direction before raising alarm. Mother Lerato exhaled slowly. You are walking into something far larger than prison ministry, she said. If this touches the Radebe Legacy Trust, it already does. Tsholofelo interrupted softly. Mother Lerato stiffened. You are sure? Yes. The room grew still. The Radebe family name was carved into universities' hospitals' scholarships. Patriarch Thabo Radebe was praised for philanthropy and economic expansion. Accusing that name without evidence was not bravery. It was social suicide. You cannot travel alone, Mother Lerato said finally. I don't plan to, Tsholofelo replied, but I must go. Mother Lerato studied her. You understand what could happen if you are wrong? Yes. And if you are right? Tsholofelo paused. Then a man died protecting a child who grew up under a stolen narrative. Mother Lerato closed her eyes briefly. When do you plan to leave tomorrow night? The Mother Superior nodded slowly. I will arrange temporary cover for your absence. As Tsholofelo stood to leave, Mother Lerato's voice softened. Be wise, not heroic. Tsholofelo gave a small nod. I don't seek heroism, she said, only completion. Later that night, she sat alone in the chapel again. She unfolded the strip of paper. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki, Cape Town, for the child. She wondered how old that child would be now. 32, perhaps already a public figure, perhaps already tied to the Radebe name. If Kabelo had switched cars, if he had shielded a boy from assassination, then the heir of a powerful empire had once nearly died, and someone had ensured that detail vanished from court transcripts. Her mind returned to the suited man Mafo had mentioned. If that man had visited before Kabelo's death, it meant the dynasty was still monitoring loose ends, and she had just become one. A sudden knock echoed down the convent corridor. Tsholofelo stiffened. It was late. Another knock. She rose quietly and stepped toward the window instead of the door. Below, near the outer gate, a dark sedan idled. Its headlights were off. She could not see inside. But it was not a taxi, and it was not moving. Her pulse quickened. Was it coincidence or confirmation? She stepped back from the window slowly. Cape Town was no longer optional. It was urgent. Because if someone was watching the convent, then the envelope's message had already triggered movement. She closed her eyes. "Give me courage," she whispered. Not loud courage, not dramatic courage, just the kind that walks forward without trembling. Outside, the sedan remained parked. Inside, Tsholofelo began preparing to leave. The flight to Cape Town left just after sunset. Sister Tsholofelo Seema had never liked airports. They were full of departures without explanations, people leaving silently, stories folding inward like sealed envelopes. She carried no suitcase, only a small canvas bag, and the wooden cross wrapped in cloth at the bottom. Mother Superior Lorato had arranged a temporary stay at a small convent in Observatory, near the University of Cape Town. Officially, Tsholofelo was traveling for inter-convent consultation. Unofficially, she was carrying a message that had survived 32 years of silence. As the plane lifted off, Johannesburg's lights shrank into scattered constellations beneath her. She did not close her eyes. If someone was watching her movements, she wanted no room for doubt. No secrecy in posture, no nervousness that could be misread as guilt. Courage, she had realized, was not loud. It was deliberate. Cape Town greeted her with wind. The air smelled of salt and cold ocean, different from the dry metallic scent of Johannesburg. Table Mountain stood dark against the sky, silent and unmoved by human secrets. The convent in Observatory was smaller than the one she had left. Whitewashed walls, a narrow garden with rosemary and lavender. Sister Nomusa Dikweni welcomed her warmly, unaware of the storm Tsholofelo carried in her sleeve. "You must be tired," Sister Nomusa said kindly. "Rest tonight. We will talk in the morning." But rest did not come easily. She lay awake, listening to the wind brush against the windows. Somewhere in the city, Advocate Ayanda Mbeki was sleeping or perhaps working late in an office filled with old case files and unanswered letters. Tsholofelo waited until mid-morning the next day to make the call. She used the convent's shared office phone. The receptionist at Mbeki and Associates answered briskly. "Good morning, Mbeki and Associates. My name is Sister Tsholofelo Seema," she said calmly. "I need to speak with Advocate Ayanda Mbeki regarding a wrongful conviction case." There was a pause. "Do you have an appointment number?" "Then I'm afraid it concerns the conviction of Ntate Kabelo Motsamai," she added carefully. Silence. Longer this time. Hold. The line clicked. Seconds stretched. Then another voice came on, steady, composed, unmistakably alert. "This is Ayanda Mbeki." Tsholofelo exhaled softly. "My name is Sister Tsholofelo Seema," she repeated. "I was with Ntate Kabelo Motsamai when he died 3 days ago." Another pause. "Where are you calling from?" Ayanda asked. "Cape Town. And what do you want from me?" "I don't want anything," Tsholofelo replied. "I am delivering something." The silence on the line sharpened. "Be specific," Ayanda said quietly. "He left your name inside a carved wooden cross," Tsholofelo said. The reaction was immediate. "Where are you?" Ayanda asked again. Voice lower now. "Observatory." "Do not come to my office," Ayanda said. "Meet me at St. Mark's Church in Woodstock. Noon. Come alone." The line disconnected. Tsholofelo replaced the receiver gently. Sister Nomusa looked at her from the doorway. "You seem troubled," she observed. "Just busy, Tsholofelo," replied softly. She arrived at St. Mark's early. The church was old stone walls weathered by decades of salt wind. It smelled faintly of incense and damp wood. She sat in the third pew and waited. At exactly noon, a woman entered through the side door. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki was taller than Tsholofelo had imagined. Early 40s, sharp features, a tailored dark coat that spoke of professionalism without vanity. Her eyes scanned the church quickly before settling on Tsholofelo. "You're young," Ayanda said as she approached. Yes. Ayanda did not sit. Show me. Tsholofelo reached into her bag and withdrew the wooden cross. She placed it carefully on the pew between them. Ayanda examined it without touching it at first. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It belonged to Ntate Kabelo Motsamai." Ayanda's jaw tightened. "He wrote to me once," she said quietly. "When 29 years ago." Tsholofelo's breath caught. "And the letter never arrived," Ayanda said. Tsholofelo turned the cross over and pressed the hidden indentation. The bottom shifted. She unfolded the strip of paper and handed it to Ayanda. Ayanda read it. Her expression did not change immediately, but her breathing did. "For the child," she murmured. "Yes," Tsholofelo said. Ayanda sat down slowly. "You have no idea what this means," she said. "Then tell me," Tsholofelo replied gently. Ayanda stared at the symbol carved into the wood. "This crest belongs to the Radebe Legacy Trust," she said. "I know." Ayanda's gaze flicked up sharply. "How Tsholofelo?" She corrected herself. "I have seen the same symbol on a ring kept in prison storage." Ayanda leaned back, studying her carefully. "Do you understand the weight of what you are suggesting? That Ntate Kabelo took the fall for someone connected to the Radebe family?" Tsholofelo asked calmly. "Yes." Ayanda's voice lowered. "There was a rumor," she said, an unverified one, that the murder in 1991 was not random. "It wasn't," Tsholofelo replied. Ayanda's eyes sharpened. "You're certain?" "Yes." Ayanda closed her eyes briefly. "There was a boy in that car," she said. "Official records list only the deceased businessman, but an internal memo one I was never allowed to access mentioned minor witness extraction." "Extraction," Tsholofelo repeated. "A removal from the narrative," Ayanda said bitterly. "Do you know who the boy was?" Tsholofelo asked. Ayanda hesitated. "I suspect," she said slowly, "that he is now known as Sifo Radebe." Tsholofelo's heart stilled. Sifo Radebe, the current public face of the Radebe Legacy Trust. 32 years old. Educated in London. Celebrated philanthropist. "Are you certain?" Tsholofelo asked. "No," Ayanda replied. "But the ages align." Silence settled heavily. "If Kabelo switched cars to protect Sifo," Radebe Tsholofelo said slowly, "then the ambush was meant for the child." "Yes." "And the wrong man died." "Yes." "And Kabelo confessed to shield the heir." Ayanda's gaze hardened, which would mean the Radebe dynasty owes its survival to a man it left in prison. Tsholofelo swallowed. Why would they not clear his name once the boy was safe? Ayanda's voice turned cold. Because admitting the truth would reveal that the murder was politically motivated, and that the trust's inheritance was nearly erased. "And the business rival who died?" Tsholofelo asked. "A casualty," Ayanda said. Tsholofelo felt her stomach twist. "And now," Ayanda said quietly, "if this cross can be authenticated as Kabelo's, and if the witness statements were indeed removed, this could reopen the case." "But he is dead," Tsholofelo whispered. "Yes," Ayanda agreed. "But posthumous exoneration is still justice." A sudden creak echoed at the back of the church. Both women turned. A man stood near the entrance. Dark suit, still, watching. Ayanda's expression shifted instantly. "You were followed," she said softly. "I don't know," Tsholofelo replied. The man did not move. He simply observed. Ayanda stood calmly. "Do not look afraid," she murmured. "I'm not," Tsholofelo answered. Ayanda picked up the cross and slid it into her coat. "Leave separately," she instructed. "Return to your convent. Do not travel tonight." "And you?" Tsholofelo asked. Ayanda's lips curved faintly. "I have been inconvenient for years." She walked toward the back of the church, directly toward the man. Tsholofelo remained seated, pulse pounding. Through the stained glass reflection, she saw Ayanda stop in front of him. They exchanged a few quiet words. The man's posture stiffened. Then he stepped aside. Ayanda exited first. The man remained, and his eyes shifted toward Tsholofelo. Not angry, not threatening, assessing, a warning. Tsholofelo rose slowly. She did not hurry. She did not look back. Outside, the Cape Town wind pressed against her habit. The message had been delivered, but the system had noticed, and the Radebe dynasty was awake. The wind in Cape Town did not rest. It scraped along rooftops and pressed against windows as if trying to force entry into rooms that preferred privacy. Sister Tsholofelo Seema stood at the convent window and observatory and watched the early light spread over the city. Below, cars moved steadily toward the business district. People carried coffee cups and briefcases, unaware that a sealed truth had just shifted direction inside a small church in Woodstock. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki had taken the cross. The message had been delivered. But something in Ayanda's expression lingered in Tsholofelo's mind, not fear, not surprise. Recognition, as if she had been expecting this moment for years. Tsholofelo's phone vibrated softly in her hand. An unknown number. She hesitated only briefly before answering. Sister Tsholofelo, Ayanda's voice said, "Yes, you were followed," Ayanda stated plainly. Tsholofelo closed her eyes briefly. "I thought so." "He is not police," Ayanda continued. "He works private security. I've seen him before at a Radebe Foundation gala." The confirmation tightened something in Tsholofelo's chest. "They are monitoring you," Ayanda said, "which means they know Kabelo passed something before he died." "Do they know what?" Tsholofelo asked. "Not yet," Ayanda replied, "but they will assume the worst." Silence stretched. "What happens now?" Tsholofelo asked. "I have already begun requesting archived court transcripts," Ayanda said. "And I contacted a journalist I trust." "Will that not provoke them?" Tsholofelo asked. Ayanda's voice turned firm. "It already has." A pause. "There is something else," Ayanda added. "What the Trust's annual donor briefing is tomorrow night. Tsholofelo Radebe will be speaking." Tsholofelo's pulse quickened. "In Cape Town?" she asked. "Yes. Will you attend?" "I wasn't planning to," Ayanda said. "But now I am." Tsholofelo swallowed. "And?" Ayanda hesitated. "You should leave," she said quietly. "Return to Johannesburg." "Because I'm safer there?" Tsholofelo asked. "No," Ayanda replied. "Because your role was delivery. You've done it." Tsholofelo leaned her forehead lightly against the window. "I made a promise," she said. "And you kept it." "Not fully," Tsholofelo whispered. "He asked for the truth delivered, not hidden again in legal paperwork." Ayanda exhaled softly. "You're not a lawyer," she said. "No," Tsholofelo agreed. "But I'm not blind." Another silence. "If I attend tomorrow," Tsholofelo asked carefully, "would that complicate your position?" "Yes." "Would it help?" Ayanda paused longer this time. "Possibly." The next evening, the Radebe Legacy Trust's annual donor event unfolded inside a glass-walled conference center, overlooking the ocean. Tsholofelo stood across the street watching guests arrive. Men in tailored suits, women in structured dresses, cameras flashing. Tsholofelo Radebe's image appeared on a banner near the entrance, smiling, composed, philanthropic. 32 years old, the same age the child in the car would be now. Ayanda joined her quietly. "You're sure about this?" Ayanda asked. "No," Tsholofelo replied honestly. "But I am sure about why I'm here." Ayanda handed her a small badge. "Press guest," she said. "Borrowed." They entered separately. Inside the room buzzed with controlled optimism. Champagne glasses clinked. Screens displayed photos of hospitals funded by the Trust. At exactly 8 o'clock, Tsholofelo Radebe stepped onto the stage. He was poised, confident. The crowd applauded warmly. "As we expand our outreach programs," he began, "we continue the legacy of my grandfather, Tsholofelo Radebe, who believed in resilience, in opportunity, in protecting the next generation. Protecting the next generation. Tsholofelo felt the words land heavily. Sifo continued speaking about education grants and rural development. Then, Ayanda leaned slightly toward Tsholofelo. "Look at his left hand," she whispered. Tsholofelo focused. A silver ring gleamed under the stage lights. The same crest. Her breath caught. It was unmistakable. Sifo Radebe wore the same symbol, carved into Kabelo's cross. Her chest tightened. The heir had survived, and the man who protected him had died unnamed in a prison infirmary. The applause rose again as Sifo concluded his speech. "Thank you for your continued trust," he said warmly. Trust. Ayanda's jaw tightened. When the event shifted to mingling, Ayanda moved strategically through the crowd. Tsholofelo remained near the edge watching. The private security man from the church stood near the far wall. He saw her immediately. His expression changed, not startled, prepared. He stepped toward her. "You should not be here," he said calmly. "Neither should ghosts," Tsholofelo replied softly. He studied her carefully. "You don't understand the consequences," he said. "Explain them," she answered. "Reopening that case destabilizes more than one family," he said. "You expose political history, financial networks, and a wrongful conviction," she added. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "You think this is about morality," he said. "It's about preservation. Preservation of what she asked." He did not answer directly. Instead, he glanced toward the stage area where Sifo now spoke with donors. "If that narrative collapses," he said quietly, "it drags everything with it." Tsholofelo held his gaze. Then perhaps it was built on something unstable. Before he could respond, Ayanda approached. "I believe we've met," she said coolly to the man. He inclined his head slightly, but did not speak. Ayanda turned to Tsholofelo. "We've confirmed something," she said quietly. What the original ballistic report was altered. Tsholofelo's heart pounded. How the bullet trajectory didn't match Kabelo's position in the vehicle, Ayanda said, which means he couldn't have fired the fatal shot. "And the boy?" Tsholofelo asked. Ayanda's eyes flicked toward Sifo. "The boy was extracted before police arrived," she said. The security man's posture stiffened. "You're making assumptions," he said. "No," Ayanda replied evenly. "We're assembling facts." Sifo Radebe's laughter echoed lightly across the room. "Unaware, or pretending to be." Tsholofelo felt a sudden surge of clarity. Kabelo had not only protected the boy, he had protected the narrative that allowed Sifo to grow into power without the shadow of attempted assassination. If the truth emerged, Sifo's image would fracture. But so would the trust's moral authority. "Does he know?" Tsholofelo asked quietly. Ayanda's expression softened slightly. "I don't think so," she said. The security man's jaw tightened. "That's enough," he said. Ayanda's voice remained steady. "No, it isn't." Across the room, Sifo's gaze drifted toward them. For a fraction of a second, his eyes locked onto Tsholofelo, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, not of her face, but of the crest carved into the cross now hidden inside Ayanda's coat. He excused himself from the donors and began walking toward them. The room seemed to narrow. The ocean outside the glass walls darkened under the night sky. Sifo stopped a few feet away. "Advocate Mbeki," he said politely. Ayanda inclined her head. "Mr. Radebe." Sifo's eyes moved to Tsholofelo. "And you are Sister Tsholofelo Seema," she replied calmly. Sifo studied her face. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we share a connection." Her pulse steadied. "Yes," she answered. The security man stepped closer, but Sifo lifted a hand, slightly subtle authority. "What connection?" Sifo asked. Tsholofelo did not hesitate. "Ntate Kabelo Motsamai," she said. The name landed in the air like a stone, dropped into still water. Tsholofelo's composure cracked just briefly, then returned. "He was a criminal," Tsholofelo said carefully. "He was your shield," Tsholofelo replied softly. "Silence." The ocean wind pressed against the glass walls. Tsholofelo's eyes darkened. "You should be careful with accusations," he said quietly. "I am careful," she answered. Ayanda stepped forward slightly. "We have documentation," she said evenly, "and we intend to file for review." The security man shifted again. Sifo looked at Tsholofelo for a long moment. "Do you know what you're risking?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "And you're willing?" "Yes." Sifo's jaw tightened. Then unexpectedly he said, "Meet me tomorrow. Alone." Ayanda's eyes narrowed. "That would be unwise," she said. Sifo's gaze remained on Tsholofelo. "If you truly care about truth," he said, "then hear mine." The offer hung in the air. A private meeting with the heir. Tsholofelo felt the weight of Kabelo's final whisper in her chest. For the child was standing in front of her, and the truth was about to choose a direction. The ocean did not sleep that night. From the small guest room at the observatory convent, Sister Tsholofelo Seema could hear the distant crash of waves carried inland by the wind. It sounded like something persistent, something that refused to stop returning. She sat at the narrow desk, hands folded, replaying Sifo Radebe's words. "Meet me tomorrow. Alone." Advocate Ayanda Mbeki had been clear the moment they stepped outside the gala venue. "You will not go alone," Ayanda had said. "He asked me," Tsholofelo replied. "He asked you strategically," Ayanda countered, "not spiritually." Now, hours later, Tsholofelo understood the weight of the decision before her. If she refused the meeting, Sifo could frame the narrative, first publicly dismissing rumors before legal filings gained traction. If she accepted, she risked walking into a controlled space where the dynasty's version of truth could attempt to swallow her. But Kabelo's final words echoed in her mind. For the child. Not for revenge, not for exposure, for the child. If Sifo truly had been that boy extracted from a murder scene, shielded from public record, allowed to inherit a legacy built partly on silence, then perhaps he did not know the full story. Perhaps he had grown up with a different version of events. The next morning, Ayanda arrived at the convent before 8. "You didn't sleep," Ayanda observed as she entered the modest sitting room. "Neither did you," Tsholofelo replied gently. Ayanda gave a short nod. He sent a formal invitation at 2 a.m., a meeting at his private office overlooking the waterfront. "That sounds public," Tsholofelo said. "It sounds controlled," Ayanda corrected. Tsholofelo studied her face. "You don't think he knows everything," she said. Ayanda hesitated. "I think he knows something," she replied carefully. "But I don't think he knows about the ballistic discrepancy. And I don't think he knows Kabelo attempted to contact me decades ago. So this meeting could reveal his ignorance," Tsholofelo said. "Or confirm his complicity," Ayanda replied. Silence stretched between them. "I will not walk in blindly," Tsholofelo said finally. Ayanda exhaled slowly. "You're going," she said, not a question. "Yes, then I go with you. He asked for me alone." "And I am not with you," Ayanda replied. "I will be nearby." Tsholofelo nodded. The Radebe office tower rose high above the waterfront, a sleek glass structure, reflecting ocean light like polished armor. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Sifo Radebe waited in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood as Tsholofelo entered. No security guard this time, no immediate threat, just controlled calm. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You asked," she replied. He gestured toward a seat. She remained standing. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sifo moved first. "I have been reviewing historical records," he said, "after last night." "Tsholofelo," said nothing. My grandfather rarely spoke about the early 1990s, Tsholofelo continued. He described that period as unstable, dangerous. Was it? She asked. Yes, Tsholofelo replied evenly. There were threats, political tensions, business rivalries, and an ambush, she added. His jaw tightened slightly. Yes. You were in the car, she said. It was not a question. Tsholofelo's eyes flickered. I was very young, he said carefully. But you remember, she said. He did not answer immediately. Then quietly, yes. The word shifted the air between them. What do you remember? She asked gently. Tsholofelo walked toward the window, staring at the ocean below. I remember my father shouting, he said. I remember glass breaking, and someone pulling me out of the vehicle. Kabelo, she said. Tsholofelo turned. You speak his name as if he were a hero, he said. He died believing he had protected you, she replied. Silence filled the room. My family told me he betrayed us, Tsholofelo said, that he sold information, that the ambush was his fault. Does that match your memory? She asked. Tsholofelo hesitated. I remember him shielding me, he admitted. I remember him pushing me down in the back seat. Then why did he confess? She asked softly. Tsholofelo's expression hardened. Because he was guilty, he insisted, of what she pressed. Tsholofelo did not answer. Tsholofelo stepped closer. He attempted to contact a lawyer decades ago, she said. The letters were intercepted. Tsholofelo's posture stiffened. Who told you that, he asked. He told me, she replied. That's impossible, Tsholofelo said sharply. He died. Yes, she said calmly. But truth survives breath. Tsholofelo's composure began to fracture. Not dramatically, but subtly. My grandfather built everything we have, he said. Hospitals, scholarships, and a narrative, she added. His eyes sharpened. Be careful, he warned. I am, she replied. Careful enough to ask you one question. She held his gaze. If Kabelo had not switched cars that night, would you be alive? The question landed like a physical force. Tsholofelo's lips parted slightly. He did not speak. Tsholofelo saw it then. Not arrogance, not cruelty, confusion. Something he had never allowed himself to examine. You think my entire life is built on a lie? He asked quietly. I think your life was saved by a man your family left to rot, she replied gently. He turned away sharply. That's not how it happened, he muttered. Then tell me how it happened, she said. Tsholofelo pressed his palms against the glass window. I was told the ambush was random, he said, that a disgruntled competitor hired criminals. And you never questioned the missing witness statements, she asked. I was a child, he snapped. Silence followed. Tsholofelo's voice softened. You're not a child anymore. The room felt smaller. You're reopening a wound, Tsholofelo said. It was never closed, she replied. Tsholofelo turned slowly. What do you want from me? He asked. Recognition, she said. Not confession, not collapse. Recognition. He studied her face carefully. You're not asking for money, he said. No. You're not asking for public apology. No. Then what? For you to read the full file, she said. With Advocate Ayanda Mbeki present. Tsholofelo hesitated. That would trigger legal chaos, he said. Yes, and possibly expose my grandfather. Yes, and destabilize the trust. Yes. The repetition hung heavy. Why should I do that? He asked. Because if Kabelo died for you, she said quietly, then you owe him the dignity of truth. Tsholofelo looked down at his ring. The crest gleamed in the morning light. The same symbol carved into the cross. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then give me 24 hours, he said. To decide, she asked. To verify, he replied. Tsholofelo nodded slowly. If you bury this again, she said softly, I will not stop. His eyes met hers. I believe you, he said. As she turned to leave, he added one final sentence. If he truly saved me, Sifo said quietly, then I need to know. Outside the building, Ayanda waited in her car. Well, she asked as Tsholofelo entered. He remembers, Tsholofelo said. Ayanda's eyes widened slightly, and he's questioning the narrative. Ayanda exhaled. That's dangerous, she murmured. Yes, Tsholofelo agreed. For everyone. Behind them, the glass tower reflected sunlight like armor. But armor could crack. And inside, Sifo Radebe's mind, something had begun to fracture. 24 hours can feel like a lifetime when truth is deciding whether to breathe. Sister Tsholofelo Seema returned to the convent in observatory with a strange quiet inside her. Not peace, not relief. Something closer to suspension, as if events had climbed to the edge of something irreversible and were waiting for gravity to choose. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki did not pretend to be calm. He won't decide alone, Ayanda said as they sat at the small wooden table in the convent kitchen. There are advisors, trustees, senior family members. If he opens this, he destabilizes more than reputation. He destabilizes silence, Tsholofelo replied. Ayanda gave her a measured look. Silence is profitable. Tsholofelo folded her hands. So is justice. Eventually, Ayanda almost smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Eventually can take decades, she said. Kabelo spent 32 years in prison. The words settled heavily between them. Outside Cape Town moved forward as if nothing was shifting beneath its surface. Tourists lined up for cable cars. Office workers typed emails. Children crossed streets holding hands. Somewhere inside the Radebe Tower, Sifo was reading files, or being persuaded not to. That evening, Ayanda received an encrypted email. She read it twice before handing the phone to Tsholofelo. Meeting confirmed. Private. 9 p.m. Waterfront estate. No signature, but no doubt. He's not bringing this to the board, Ayanda said. Not yet. Will you come? Tsholofelo asked. I'll be close, Ayanda replied, but if he truly wants honesty, he'll speak without witnesses. The estate sat along a quiet stretch overlooking the Atlantic white walls, controlled lighting cameras embedded discreetly in corners. Security allowed Tsholofelo through without confrontation. This time there were no gala banners, no public smiles. Sifo Radebe waited in a smaller sitting room overlooking dark water. He looked different, less composed. His jacket hung loosely over the back of a chair. His tie was gone. He gestured for her to sit. She remained standing for a moment. You read it, she said. Yes, he replied, and he exhaled slowly. The ballistic report was amended 3 weeks after the trial, he said. The original trajectory placed the shooter outside the vehicle, and Kabelo was inside, she replied. Yes. Silence stretched. My grandfather signed off on the amendment, Sifo added quietly. The ocean crashed faintly in the distance. Did he explain why, she asked. He wrote one line in the margin, Sifo said. Tsholofelo waited. Necessary for continuity. Her chest tightened. Continuity. Of what? Of power, of inheritance. Continuity of the trust, she asked softly. Sifo's jaw flexed. Of protection, he said. Of you, she replied. He did not argue. For the first time, Tsholofelo saw something unguarded in his face. Not defensiveness. Grief. I always believed Kabelo betrayed us, Sifo said. That he leaked roots, that he endangered me. And now, she asked. Now I see a different possibility, he said quietly. Say it, she urged gently. That he shielded me, Sifo whispered. The admission hung in the air like something fragile. And he paid for it, she said. Yes. Sifo stood and walked toward the window. My grandfather told me once, he said that leadership requires sacrifice. He sacrificed someone else, she replied. The words landed. Sifo turned slowly. You're asking me to expose my own family, he said. I'm asking you to honor the man who saved your life, she corrected. He ran a hand over his face. If this becomes public, he said, the trust will face investigation. Our donors may withdraw. And Kabelo remains buried as a criminal if it doesn't, she replied. Silence again. Then Sifo did something unexpected. He removed the silver ring from his finger. He placed it on the table between them. This crest, he said quietly, was presented to me when I turned 18. My grandfather said it symbolized resilience. And now she asked. Now I wonder whose resilience it truly represents. The weight of the moment pressed heavily. I can't undo 32 years, Sifo said. No, she agreed. But you can refuse to extend them. He looked at her carefully. You don't hate me, he observed. No, she said honestly. Why not because you were a child, she replied. And children are not architects of cover-ups. The ocean wind pressed against the glass. Sifo's voice lowered. If I cooperate with Advocate Mbeki, the case reopens. Yes, my grandfather's legacy fractures. Yes, my board may remove me. Possibly. He let out a long breath. And if I refuse, then I file anyway, she said quietly. With or without you. The honesty startled him. You would risk that, he asked. Yes. Why? Because Kabelo asked me to deliver truth, she replied. Not negotiate it. Sifo studied her face for a long time. Then I will support the reopening, he said. Her breath slowed. But not publicly, he added quickly. Not yet. Explain, she said. I will authorize internal review and provide the unamended ballistic report to Ayanda, he said. But I need to understand who else was involved before this explodes. You fear resistance, she said. Yes, and retaliation. Yes. She nodded slowly. Then move quickly, she said. Because others are watching. He looked at her sharply. The security operative from the gala, she said. He is not loyal to you. He is loyal to preservation. Sifo's expression darkened. I suspected as much, he said. He stepped closer to the table and picked up the ring again. For years, he said, I wore this, believing it represented survival. And now, she asked. He met her gaze. Now I wonder if it represents debt. Silence settled between them. Kabelo's burial, she said gently. Was it attended by anyone from your family? Sifo's eyes flickered. No, she swallowed. Then the first act of correction is simple. He understood immediately. Attend his grave, he said quietly. Yes. He nodded slowly. I can do that, he said. It was not grand, not dramatic, but it was the first crack in a carefully constructed wall. As Tsholofelo prepared to leave, Sifo spoke again. You should return to Johannesburg, he said. Things will move quickly now. She paused. I will, she said. And Zister, he added. She turned. Thank you, he said. Not for exposure, not for accusation, for confrontation. She left the estate into the night air. The ocean wind felt different now, less relentless. Inside the estate, Sifo Radebe stood alone with a ring in his hand and a narrative unraveling in his mind. In Johannesburg, Officer Mandla Nkosi received a call that lasted only 30 seconds. He did not smile afterward. He did not shout. He simply looked out over the prison yard and said quietly, Then it begins. Johannesburg did not wait for truth to settle. It reacted. By the time Sister Tsholofelo Seema's plane touched down the following afternoon, the air felt heavier than when she had left. The prison skyline rose in the distance as if nothing had shifted, but something had. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki had already filed a preliminary petition that morning. Not public yet, not explosive, but formal. A request to review the original ballistic report and reopen the conviction of Ntate Kabelo Motsamai based on procedural inconsistencies. Sifo Radebe had quietly authorized the release of internal documentation supporting the motion. No press conference, no announcement. Just paper moving inside systems that had long believed themselves stable. Systems did not like being questioned. At the convent, Mother Superior Lorato greeted Tsholofelo with a firm embrace. "You look thinner," she said quietly. "I feel clearer," Tsholofelo replied. Mother Lorato studied her. "News travels quickly in places that fear exposure," she said. "The prison called this morning." Tsholofelo's pulse tightened. "What did they say?" "They requested a formal review of your conduct," Mother Lorato replied calmly. "On what grounds overstepping pastoral boundaries?" Tsholofelo nodded slowly. It had begun. That evening she returned to the prison. She did not avoid it. Avoidance would signal retreat. Officer Mandla and Kosi waited inside the administrative office once again. This time his composure was thinner. "You have caused inconvenience," he said without greeting. "Inconvenience to whom?" she asked quietly. "To stability," he replied. "Stability built on falsified reports," she countered. His eyes darkened. "You are not a lawyer," he said. "No," she agreed, but neither was Kabelo when he was sentenced. Mandla leaned forward across the desk. "Do you know what happens when foundations are shaken?" he asked. "Yes," she replied calmly. "They are tested." He let out a short laugh. "You think you're righteous," he said. "I think I kept a promise." His jaw tightened. "You realize if this review proceeds, senior figures will be questioned," he said. "People with reach. Reach does not erase truth," she replied. Silence settled thickly between them. "You've put yourself in a precarious position," Mandla said quietly. "I was already there," she answered. He studied her carefully. "You believe Sifo Radebe will protect you?" he asked. "I believe he is reconsidering the narrative he inherited," she said. Mandla's gaze sharpened. "You spoke to him?" "Yes." A muscle in his jaw flexed, and he agreed. Mandla pressed. "He agreed to review the truth," she replied. Mandla stood abruptly and walked toward the window overlooking the yard. "You don't understand how power works," he said quietly. "Explain it to me," she replied. "It survives by containment," he said. "Containment of scandal, containment of error, containment of threats. And you contained Kabelo," she said softly. His silence confirmed more than denial could have. "I followed orders," he said finally. "From whom?" Mandla did not answer. Instead, he turned back toward her. "You think reopening this will free you from consequences?" he asked. "I'm not seeking freedom," she replied. "I'm seeking correction." He stared at her for a long moment. "You're not afraid," he observed again. "I am," she said honestly. "But fear is not authority." Outside the office, whispers had already begun. Word had reached inmates that legal review was underway. Ntate Mfo Seleke gripped the bars of his cell when Tsholofelo passed. "Is it true?" he asked urgently. "Yes," she said. He closed his eyes. "For 30 years," he whispered. "We thought silence was permanent." "Silence is only strong until someone speaks," she replied gently. But not everyone welcomed the shift. That evening, Dr. Zanele Dlamini requested a private conversation. They met in the infirmary storage room away from surveillance. "They are auditing files," Dr. Zanele said quietly. "Who's Tsholofelo?" asked. "Mine," she replied. A chill moved through Tsholofelo's chest. Because of the ring, she realized. "Yes." "You kept it safe," Tsholofelo said softly. "I did," Dr. Zanele replied. "But now they're searching records." "Do you regret it?" Tsholofelo asked. Dr. Zanele shook her head. "No," she said. "I regret not acting sooner." Tsholofelo's throat tightened. "We cannot undo delay," she said gently. "Only prevent extension." Dr. Zanele nodded. "They've also moved Mandla," she added. "Moved reassigned temporarily during review," she said. Tsholofelo felt a flicker of surprise. "So quickly?" "Yes," Dr. Zanele replied. "Which means this review has influence beyond this prison." Saifo's cooperation was already shifting internal alignments. Power, once stable, was recalculating. That night, a national news outlet published a short article, "Human Rights Attorney Seeks Review of 1991 Conviction Tied to Radebe Foundation History." No accusations, no names beyond Kabelo's. But the link was visible. By morning, social media threads buzzed. Some defended the trust fiercely. Others questioned historical transparency. Saifo Radebe issued a carefully worded statement by midday, the Radebe legacy. Trust supports full transparency and welcomes lawful review processes to ensure justice in all matters. Measured, neutral, but not dismissive, Officer Mandla Nkosi did not return to the prison that day. Instead, an internal compliance officer arrived from headquarters. Interviews began, records were requested, security logs reviewed. Systems that had long functioned without scrutiny were suddenly illuminated. Tsholofelo did not celebrate. She visited Kabelo's grave instead. The burial site lay in a modest cemetery outside the city, unmarked beyond a simple wooden placard bearing his name. She knelt beside the earth. "Your message reached him," she whispered. The wind moved softly through nearby trees. "He is questioning," she added quietly. She placed her hand gently on the soil. "I cannot control what he chooses next," she said. "But I delivered what you asked." Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned slowly. Saifo Radebe stood several paces away. No suit, no security, just a man. He looked at the grave for a long moment before speaking. "This is all they gave him?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she replied. He swallowed. "My family never attended," he said. "I know." Silence stretched between them. "I authorized the reopening publicly this morning," he said. Tsholofelo looked at him. "I saw. My board is divided," he added. "And you?" she asked. He stepped closer to the grave. "I am no longer divided," he said quietly. He removed the silver ring once more. He placed it gently on the wooden placard. "For him," he said. Tsholofelo felt her chest tighten. The symbol that had represented silent inheritance now rested on unmarked earth. A debt acknowledged, not repaid, but acknowledged. Behind them, the sky remained vast and indifferent, but systems were shifting. In a private office in Johannesburg, Officer Mandla Nkosi received formal notice of investigation. He read the document slowly. Then he folded it once, twice, and placed it carefully in his drawer. Not anger, not panic, just calculation. Because when truth surfaces, those who once contained it do not vanish quietly. The news did not explode, it expanded. Like a crack, spreading through glass, silent at first, then impossible to ignore. Within days of Saifo Radebe's public statement, legal commentators began dissecting the 1991 case. Old journalists resurfaced archived clippings. Retired court clerks gave cautious interviews speaking in vague language about procedural pressure during politically sensitive trials of that era. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki filed the formal motion to reopen the conviction of Ntate Kabelo Motsamai before the High Court. This time, it was no longer quiet. The petition cited newly released ballistic discrepancies with held witness documentation and irregular administrative interference in prisoner correspondence. The Radebe Legacy Trust did not oppose the motion. That detail shifted everything. Sister Tsholofelo Seema read the filings from a printed copy in the convent dining hall. The words were clinical, legal, detached. But beneath them, she felt Kabelo's breath in that infirmary bed. She folded the pages gently. Mother Superior Lerato watched her from across the table. "You understand this may go to trial," Mother Lerato said softly. "Yes, you may be called to testify." "Yes, you are still prepared," Tsholofelo nodded. "I did not seek the courtroom," she said, "but I will not avoid it." Meanwhile, at the Radebe headquarters, tension was no longer subtle. Tsholofelo sat at the head of the boardroom table, facing trustees who had known him since childhood. "Reopening this case invites media chaos," one board member said sharply. "We have donors threatening to suspend contributions." Tsholofelo remained steady. "If the foundation survives only by burying truth, then it is unstable by design," he replied. An older trustee leaned forward. "Your grandfather protected this institution through political storms," he said. "He made hard decisions. And one of those decisions placed an innocent man in prison," Tsholofelo said quietly. The room stiffened. "You cannot prove innocence," yet another trustee countered. "The evidence suggests procedural manipulation," Tsholofelo replied. "That alone warrants correction." Silence pressed heavily around the polished table. "You are risking legacy," the older trustee warned. Tsholofelo's gaze did not waver. "Legacy built on concealment deserves review." Outside the boardroom, media vans began lining the street. The story had crossed into public awareness, not as scandal, as question. Back in Johannesburg, Officer Mandla Nkosi faced formal inquiry. Two compliance officers from National Corrections Headquarters sat across from him in the administrative office. "We have documentation indicating isolation orders were expedited for Ntate Kabelo Motsamai 3 days before his death," one officer said. "Yes," Mandla replied calmly. "Behavioral precaution, based on what incident he requested access to archived legal correspondence." The compliance officer's pen paused. "That does not constitute behavioral risk. It constituted administrative complication," Mandla corrected. The room grew still. "You intercepted correspondence," the officer stated. "I followed institutional protocol," Mandla replied. "Whose instruction?" Mandla held their gaze. "I protect stability," he said evenly. The officers exchanged a glance. Stability was not a legal term. Meanwhile, Dr. Zanele Dlamini was also interviewed. She did not flinch. "Yes," she confirmed. "Medication dosage adjustments were made without medical justification." "By whom administrative override?" she replied. "Under whose authority?" Dr. Zanele met their eyes steadily. "You have the same access to that answer that I do." The net was tightening, not violently, methodically. At the convent, Tsholofelo received a letter summoning her to court as a witness. She held the envelope carefully. Mother Lerato placed a hand on her shoulder. "You will be questioned aggressively," she said. "I expect that," Tsholofelo replied. "They will attempt to discredit you." "I am not fragile," she said softly. Mother Lerato's eyes softened. "No," she agreed. "You are not." The High Court session opened 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the benches. Legal observers took notes. Tsholofelo Radebe entered without escort, drawing a wave of whispers. Sister Tsholofelo sat quietly in the witness area, hands folded. Officer Mandla Nkosi sat at the opposite end of the room, composed but visibly alert. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki presented the ballistic discrepancy. First, original trajectory analysis placed the fatal shot outside the vehicle, she stated clearly. The amended report reversed that conclusion, without documented forensic reevaluation. The courtroom murmured. Next came the witness correspondence irregularities. Letters addressed to this court by the convicted individual were intercepted. Ayanda continued. "Not once, multiple times." Eyes turned toward Mandla. When Tsholofelo was called to testify, she rose calmly. "State your name," the judge instructed. "Sister Tsholofelo Seema. Your involvement with the deceased." "I was present during his final hours," she replied. "Did he make any statements regarding the case?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "He said he did not want freedom," she answered quietly. "He wanted the truth delivered." The prosecutor attempted to undermine her. "You are not a legal expert," he said. "No," she agreed. "You cannot verify the authenticity of the documents involved." No. Then your testimony is emotional interpretation. She met his gaze steadily. No, she said. It is direct recollection. Silence followed. Ayanda called the final witness of the day, Sifo Radebe. The courtroom stilled. He took the stand. Do you recall the night of the 1991 ambush? Ayanda asked. Yes, he replied quietly. Were you present in the vehicle? Yes. Gasps rippled through the room. Were you ever listed in official reports as a minor witness? She asked. No. Were you extracted from the vehicle before police arrival? Sifo hesitated. Yes. By whom? Kabelo Motsamai. The courtroom fell silent. Did he endanger you? Ayanda pressed. No, Sifo said firmly. He shielded me. A sharp intake of breath echoed from the back rows. Did your grandfather instruct that the amended ballistic report be filed? Ayanda asked. Yes. And do you believe that amendment was accurate? Sifo paused. Then no. The weight of the admission settled like a stone dropped into water. Officer Mandla's expression remained controlled, but a flicker of tension crossed his jaw. The judge leaned forward. Based on this testimony, he said the court finds sufficient cause to formally reopen the conviction of Ntate Kabelo Motsamai and initiate posthumous review. The gavel struck, not loudly, but decisively. Tsholofelo exhaled slowly. Not victory, not yet, but correction had begun. Outside, the courthouse cameras flashed as Sifo stepped forward. I was a child, he said to the press, and I was protected by a man who was later condemned. That condemnation must be examined. Behind him, Tsholofelo stood quietly. No microphones, no spotlight, just presence. In the prison, Officer Mandla Nkosi was suspended pending further investigation. His office was emptied by evening, but as he walked out of the gates one final time, he did not look defeated. He looked calculating, because correction unsettles those who built containment, and when truth surfaces, resistance rarely ends cleanly. The ocean continued crashing against Cape Town's shore. The crack in the glass had widened, but the full fracture was still approaching. Reopening a case does not guarantee redemption. It guarantees resistance. Within 48 hours of the High Court's decision, headlines sharpened. Media outlets that had once cautiously described the situation as a procedural review now use stronger words. Wrongful conviction, shielded heir, amended forensic report. The Radebe legacy, trusts, stock holdings dipped slightly. Not catastrophically, but noticeably. And whenever influence trembles, it looks for someone to blame. Sister Tsholofelo Seema did not expect gratitude, but she did not expect the smear campaign to begin so quickly. An anonymous blog published an article titled, "Young Nun Manipulates Billionaire for Political Gain." It questioned her motives, her background, her sudden involvement in a decades-old case. It implied romantic influence, manipulation, naivety, exploited for attention. By afternoon, the article had circulated widely on social media. At the convent, Mother Superior Lerato placed a printed copy on the table between them. "They will attempt to make this about you," Mother Lerato said calmly. Tsholofelo read the article without flinching. "They need a smaller target," she said quietly. "Yes," Mother Lerato agreed. "And you are accessible." Tsholofelo folded the paper carefully. "I will not respond publicly," she said. "That is wise," Mother Lerato replied. "Truth does not defend itself through outrage." Meanwhile, at Radebe headquarters, pressure intensified. Several trustees demanded Sifo step aside, temporarily, until the review concluded. "You have jeopardized donor confidence," one board member stated bluntly. "I have acknowledged procedural irregularities," Sifo replied evenly. "You have validated accusations," another countered. "No," Sifo corrected. "I have validated inquiry." The older trustee leaned forward sharply. "You are dismantling your grandfather's authority." Sifo's voice remained steady. "If authority requires suppression, then it deserves dismantling. Silence followed. The board voted to retain him, but narrowly. Support was thinning, and outside institutional walls, forces moved more quietly. In Johannesburg, Officer Mandla Nkosi did not retreat. Suspended, yes. Silenced, no. He met with a man in a private office overlooking Sandton. The man wore no uniform, no badge, just wealth. "You were careless," the man said calmly. "I contained for 32 years, Mandla replied. "The leak who came from inside the trust." The man's expression darkened. "Containment is no longer your responsibility," he said. "Minimize exposure, redirect narrative." How, Mandla asked. "Discredit the source," the man replied. Mandla's eyes sharpened. The nun, "Yes," and the lawyer, "Yes," and Tsholofelo Mandla pressed. The man hesitated. "For now, protect him," he said. "He is still salvageable." Salvageable. The word lingered. Back at the High Court, the posthumous review hearings began in earnest. Advocate Ayanda Mbeki presented reconstructed witness accounts, one of which had been tracked down through painstaking effort. Mr. Sibusiso Molefe, now frail but resolute, took the stand. "I was junior accountant for the Radebe Group in 1991, he testified. "Did you attend meetings regarding the ambush?" Ayanda asked. "Yes." "What was discussed?" "That the child must not appear in police records," Molefe said. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Why, Ayanda pressed. "To prevent vulnerability," he replied. "If rivals knew the heir had survived, future threats could follow." "And Kabelo?" Ayanda asked. "He volunteered," Molefe said quietly. He said, "Let it end with me." The courtroom fell silent. Tsholofelo closed his eyes briefly as the words settled. Across the room, Tsholofelo felt her chest tighten. Kabelo had not been coerced. He had chosen protection over freedom. The prosecution attempted to undermine Molefe's credibility. "You have no written proof," the prosecutor said sharply. No, Molefe agreed, because proof was buried. The judge leaned forward. "Did you ever communicate these concerns externally?" he asked. "I tried," Molefe replied. Letters disappeared. Ayanda did not glance at Tsholofelo, but the connection was clear. After court adjourned that afternoon, Sifo approached Tsholofelo outside the courthouse. "They're turning you into a villain online," he said quietly. "I've seen," she replied. "You should issue a statement," he urged. "No," she said gently. "Why not?" "Because this is not about my reputation," she replied. Sifo studied her face. "You don't seem angry," he observed. "I am not surprised," she said. He hesitated. "My security team identified the source of the smear article," he said. And she asked. "Linked to a consultancy firm previously contracted by the trust," he admitted. "Still contracted?" she asked calmly. Sifo's jaw tightened. "Not after today." That evening, he terminated multiple advisory contracts tied to crisis management firms associated with narrative suppression. The board protested, but this time, Sifo did not yield. Meanwhile, Officer Mandla received notice that formal charges were being considered, not just administrative misconduct, but obstruction of justice. He read the document slowly. 32 years of silence had felt stable. Now it was unraveling rapidly. He made one final call. "Release the file," he said quietly. "What file?" the voice on the other end asked. "The internal memo," Mandla replied. "Let it leak." "Are you sure?" the voice asked. "Yes," Mandla said. "If I fall, I do not fall alone." The next morning, a confidential internal memo surfaced anonymously online, dated 1991, signed by Thabo Radebe. The content was brief. "For continuity of leadership and preservation of the heir, alternative accountability measures will be enacted. KM has agreed." The leak ignited media frenzy. There was no longer ambiguity. KM Kabelo Motsamai. Alternative accountability measures. Sacrifice formalized. At the convent, Tsholofelo read the memo silently. Mother Lerato stood beside her. "It is undeniable now," Mother Lerato said softly. "Yes," Tsholofelo replied. "But exposure invites retaliation," Mother Lerato added. As if summoned by the warning, the convent gate buzzer rang sharply. A police vehicle waited outside. 2 officers stood by the entrance. "Sister Tsholofelo Seema," one asked. "Yes, we need you to accompany us for questioning." Mother Lerato stiffened. On what grounds, she demanded. "Interference in a sealed investigation," the officer replied. Tsholofelo felt no panic, just clarity. This was the counterstrike. She nodded calmly. "I will cooperate." As she stepped into the police vehicle, cameras across the street flashed. The narrative had shifted again. Not collapse, escalation. Inside the moving car, Tsholofelo folded her hands. Truth had surfaced, but systems rarely surrender without resistance. And somewhere behind the unfolding chaos, Kabelo's name was being spoken, without contempt, for the first time in decades. Correction had begun. But justice was not finished yet. The police station smelled of old paper and institutional coffee. Sister Tsholofelo Seema sat in a narrow interview room beneath fluorescent lights that hummed faintly overhead. The walls were beige, undecorated, designed to make people feel smaller than their words. Across from her sat a senior investigator, Captain Themba Mokoena, and a younger officer taking notes. "You understand you are not under arrest," Captain Mokoena began calmly. "Yes," Tsholofelo replied. "But you are being questioned in connection with the unauthorized dissemination of confidential historical material." "I did not disseminate anything," she said quietly. Captain Mokoena studied her face carefully. "Did you possess documentation related to the Radib Trust before it became public?" "No." "Did you communicate directly with Mr. Sifo Radabe prior to the court motion?" "Yes." "Did you encourage him to release internal documents?" "I encouraged him to examine truth," she replied. The younger officer glanced up briefly. Captain Mokoena leaned back in his chair. "You understand that high-profile cases create political tension," he said. "Yes, and that certain stakeholders believe you manipulated this situation." Tsholofelo did not flinch. Belief does not equal fact. Silence settled between them. Captain Mokoena's tone shifted slightly. "Why did you involve yourself at all?" he asked. "You are 20 years old. A novice. You could have stayed in pastoral comfort." "I was present when Ntate Kabelo Motsamai died," she replied. "He entrusted me with truth." "That is not legal language," the captain said. "No," she agreed. "It is moral language." Captain Mokoena studied her for a long moment. Then he slid a printed document across the table. The leaked memo. "You have seen this," he said. "Yes." "Do you believe it authentic?" "Yes." "On what basis?" "Because it aligns with what was withheld," she replied calmly. "Because the ballistic amendment occurred 3 weeks after the trial. Because witness statements were removed. Because letters were intercepted." The younger officer stopped writing. Captain Mokoena leaned forward slightly. "You speak confidently," he said. "I speak consistently," she replied. Silence again. After nearly an hour of questioning, Captain Mokoena closed the file. "You are free to go," he said. Tsholofelo nodded. "Thank you." As she stepped out of the station, a wall of cameras greeted her. Reporters shouted questions. "Sister, did you leak the memo? Are you being charged? Did Sifo Radebe betray his grandfather?" She did not raise her voice. She did not defend herself. She simply said, one sentence. "I was asked to deliver truth. I did." Then she walked forward without stopping. The footage circulated within minutes. Back at the High Court, the reopened case entered its final stage. The judge reviewed accumulated evidence, the original ballistic report, the amended document, the intercepted letters, the testimony of Sibusiso Molefe, and Tsholofelo Seema's admission. The courtroom filled to capacity. Tsholofelo sat in the front row, no longer shielded by corporate distance. Officer Mandla Nkosi sat several rows back, expression unreadable. When the judge entered the room, stilled. This court has examined the procedural history of the 1991 conviction of Ntate Kabelo Motsamai. The judge began. His voice was measured. Evidence demonstrates that critical forensic analysis was altered without proper documentation. Witness records were suppressed. Correspondence from the convicted individual was intercepted. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Furthermore, the judge continued. Credible testimony confirms that Mr. Motsamai shielded a minor present in the vehicle during the ambush. Tsholofelo lowered his head. This court therefore finds that the conviction of Ntate Kabelo Motsamai cannot stand under scrutiny. A pause. In the interest of justice, the conviction is hereby vacated. Ntate Kabelo Motsamai is posthumously exonerated. The words hung in the air, not loud, not dramatic, but decisive. For a moment, no one moved. Then the courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in collective release. Some wept, some simply exhaled. Tsholofelo closed his eyes, shoulders lowering as if something long carried had finally been acknowledged. Tsholofelo felt her throat tighten. 32 years, reduced to a single sentence, posthumously exonerated. The judge raised a hand for silence. This ruling does not erase the years lost, he said, but it restores the record. Record, not memory. Memory belonged to people. Outside the courthouse, press gathered again. Tsholofelo stepped forward first. "My life was preserved by a man whose sacrifice was concealed," he said into the microphones. "I acknowledge that concealment today." He paused. "I cannot undo the past, but I can refuse to extend its injustice." Behind him, Advocate Ayanda Mbeki stood steady, and beside her, Tsholofelo remained quiet. No applause, no triumph, just correction. In Johannesburg, Officer Mandla Nkosi received formal notice of termination and referral for criminal review regarding obstruction of justice. He read the document carefully. 32 years of containment had collapsed within weeks. But even in removal, he did not appear broken. He appeared reflective, because he too had served a system that prized preservation over confession. At the cemetery that evening, Tsholofelo and Tsholofelo stood before Kabelo's grave once more. This time the wooden placard had been replaced with a proper stone marker. Ntate Kabelo Motsamai, exonerated by the High Court protector. Father, loyal. Tsholofelo knelt. "I was told you betrayed us," he said quietly. "I was wrong." The ocean wind moved through distant trees. "I will fund a scholarship in your name," Tsholofelo added, "for children of incarcerated parents." Tsholofelo did not interrupt. She watched as Tsholofelo placed fresh flowers against the stone. "You carried my childhood," he whispered. "I will carry your name." For the first time since the infirmary, Tsholofelo felt something inside her settle. Not satisfaction, completion. She had delivered truth. But the full healing that would take longer. And systems rarely collapse in a single ruling. They shift, they adapt, they resist quietly. Justice had spoken, but consequences were still unfolding. Exoneration did not end the story. It began the reckoning. Within weeks of the High Court ruling, the Radebe Legacy Trust faced formal audit review. Government oversight committees opened investigations into historical procurement contracts tied to the early 1990s. Donors divided, some withdrew in protest, others doubled their support in the name of transparency. Tsholofelo Radebe stood at the center of it all. He did not retreat, he did not resign. Instead, he held a press conference, not in a glass tower, not beneath a branded banner, but in a modest community hall in Soweto. Sister Tsholofelo Seema stood at the back of the room, unnoticed by most cameras. Tsholofelo stepped to the podium without a script. "When leadership is built on incomplete truth," he began correction, is not betrayal, it is responsibility. He did not dramatize, he did not accuse his grandfather directly. But he did something more powerful. He acknowledged concealment.
Our foundation will fund an independent historical review of all early convictions tied to security concerns during that period, he said, and we will establish the Kabelo Motsamai Justice Fellowship to support legal aid for those seeking wrongful conviction review.
The announcement shifted the room. This was no longer about one man. It was about systemic correction. Reporters raised questions about internal accountability. Tsholofelo answered without deflection. "Yes, my family benefited from silence," he said. "That silence ends here." In Johannesburg, Officer Mandla Nkosi faced formal charges: obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, administrative abuse. His courtroom appearance was brief but decisive. Unlike Kabelo decades earlier, Mandla had access to defense counsel documentation and media attention. Justice, even when corrective, was not symmetrical, but it was visible. Dr. Zanele Dlamini retained her position at the prison. After review confirmed she had preserved evidence rather than suppressed it, Father Sifo Dube submitted his resignation. "I failed to push harder," he told Tsholofelo quietly one afternoon in the prison chapel. "You survived inside a system designed to discourage confrontation," she replied gently. "That is not failure, it is limitation." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You did what many older than you did not," he said. Tsholofelo did not accept praise easily. "I did what I was asked," she replied. At the convent, the smear articles faded as quickly as they had appeared. Public interest shifted toward broader institutional questions. Mother Superior Lorato called Tsholofelo into her office one evening. "You have changed the rhythm of this house," she said softly. "Have I disrupted it?" Tsholofelo asked. "You have deepened it," Mother Lorato replied. Silence settled comfortably. "You are still a novice," Mother Lorato added. "Your vows are not final. I know. Does this experience alter your path?" Tsholofelo considered the question carefully. "No," she said at last. "It clarifies it. How I entered the convent to serve," she replied. "Now I understand service includes confrontation." Mother Lorato smiled faintly. "That is a heavy understanding at 20. "Yes," Tsholofelo agreed. "But you carry it well." Months passed. The legal review expanded beyond Kabelo's case. 3 additional convictions from the early 1990s were reopened. Not all resulted in exoneration, but each received scrutiny. The system once opaque was being examined under steady light. At the cemetery, Kabelo's grave became a quiet place of visitation. Former inmates came occasionally. Some left small tokens, coins, folded notes, flowers. Sifo visited regularly, not publicly, privately. He removed the silver crest ring permanently. In its place, he wore a simple band engraved with a single word: continuity. But now the word meant something different. Not preservation of narrative, preservation of correction. One afternoon, he met Tsholofelo there again. "You changed the direction of my life," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "Kabelo did." Sifo looked at the stone marker. "He never asked for recognition," he said. "No," she agreed. "He asked for delivery." Sifo nodded slowly. "And you delivered." Tsholofelo placed her hand lightly against the grave. "He protected you without witness," she said softly. "You protect truth with visibility. That is balance." Sifo exhaled. "I used to believe power meant control," he admitted. "Now I see it also means confession." She smiled faintly. "That is growth." As the sun lowered, long shadows stretched across the cemetery. For the first time since the infirmary, Tsholofelo felt no urgency, no tension in her chest, just stillness. The arc had reached its end. Not because injustice never existed again, but because this injustice had been acknowledged, corrected, named. That evening she returned to the prison chapel for the first time since the ruling. Inmates gathered quietly. Ntate Kabelo stood near the front. "You won," he said softly. Tsholofelo shook her head. "No," she replied. "Truth did." He smiled faintly. "That is the same thing." She sat beside him. "For years, Mfo said we believed silence was permanent." "Silence is strong," she replied, "but it is not eternal." Outside the prison yard felt unchanged, but the weight inside it had shifted. In a small infirmary room months earlier, an 85-year-old man had whispered a final request. He had not asked for release. He had not asked for sympathy. He had asked for truth to be delivered. And now his name stood clean. Not restored to life, but restored to record. In her room at the convent that night, Tsholofelo removed her veil and folded it neatly on the bedside table. She sat by the window watching Johannesburg lights flicker in the distance. She did not feel triumphant. She felt responsible. Because justice is not a singular act, it is a continuation, and continuity, she now understood, could be redefined. The phone on her small desk vibrated softly. A message from Ayanda. 3 new case inquiries came in today. "The fellowship is already active." Tsholofelo smiled faintly. Kabelo's name was moving forward, not buried, not forgotten, living inside correction. She folded her hands once more in quiet prayer. Not for victory, not for recognition, but for courage. Because somewhere in another cell, another voice might be waiting to be delivered. Epilogue. The lesson. Justice rarely arrives as thunder. More often it begins as a whisper that refuses to disappear. Ntate Kabelo Motsamai spent 32 years carrying silence so that a child could grow without fear. He died without freedom, but he did not die without purpose. And it was not a judge, nor a billionaire, nor a powerful institution that first honored that purpose. It was a 20-year-old nun who simply chose to listen. Sister Tsholofelo Seema did not possess wealth, legal authority, or political influence. What she possessed was courage without noise, the kind that walks into systems designed to intimidate and says calmly, "This does not align with truth." Her story reminds us of something deeply human. Power is not only the ability to control outcomes. Power is the willingness to correct them. Tsholofelo could have preserved his inheritance through silence. Instead, he chose acknowledgement. And in doing so, he transformed legacy from concealment into accountability. Justice in this story did not resurrect the past. It restored dignity. And sometimes that is enough. If this story moved you, tell us, which country are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have had the courage to deliver that truth? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes that even one voice, steady and unafraid, can change the direction of history. Because somewhere tonight, another truth is waiting to be delivered.